The South African Local Government Association saying it will challenge the Electricity Amendment Bill, which was passed by Parliament last week. It says the bill will strip municipalities of their powers and it is unconstitutional. The proposed law aims to end Eskom's 100-year monopoly by allowing independent power producers to supply the grid. Let's get more detail now, and we're joined by Salga CEO Lance Joel. Mr. Joel, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Let's begin with why it is that you say you support the bill. However, you want to challenge key definitions that, if not changed, will strip municipalities of their power when it comes to distributing electricity. What are you unhappy about?
Well, good evening to you as well as to the viewers, and thanks for giving us this opportunity. Well, our biggest gripe is that the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa creates the three spheres of government. It allocates powers and functions to the three spheres. One of the powers that are specifically allocated to local government exclusively is the function of electricity reticulation, meaning what is currently being delivered by municipalities through providing electricity to households, to business, and to government. That has been the arrangement in line with the Constitution. What we have now seen is that the National Council of Provinces last week adopted an amendment to the Electricity Regulation Bill that introduces a definition for reticulation of electricity. And that definition in its nature is limiting the current scope, while it will limit the future scope of municipalities in providing the electricity function, and limit it to an extent that it will negatively impact on the sustainability of municipalities from a financial point of view. So we are very concerned about that bill, and we have obviously communicated our intention to challenge it by following the next steps in the process.
Yeah. Lance, I want for the viewers to be able to understand this so that we stay away from convoluted language. Is this related, when we talk about electricity reticulation, does this have to do with municipalities collecting revenue when it comes to electricity distribution and giving some of that revenue to Eskom, because they, on their own, municipalities perhaps would not be able to distribute electricity without the support of Eskom? And it obviously goes to the question about why it is that Eskom, rather municipalities, owe Eskom billions in unpaid money.
Well, it's an unrelated matter. It has very little to do with the debts owed by municipalities to Eskom. It has to do with removing or limiting the role of municipalities. Contrary to the Constitution of the Republic, it is limiting the role of municipalities in providing electricity to households, business, and to government. That's what it is about. It has very little to do with what municipalities owe to Eskom. The nature of the debt owed to Eskom is as a result of municipalities having to buy electricity in bulk from Eskom in order to service households, business, and government from the reticulation point of view. And the inability of municipalities to collect sufficient revenue to service its debt to municipalities. That is the separate conversation that is being had. So this is an unrelated matter. It is nothing to do with the debt. It is to do with the executive authority to deliver the electricity function by municipalities.
Let's talk competence, because that has often been a word that's been used when it comes to municipalities. Are municipalities competent to do this job?
Well, in our view and in our assessment, we believe that a majority of the municipalities that provide the service are in fact competently providing the service. Of course, there are weaknesses in the system. We acknowledge that. We're not going to run away from that. And we are not going to avoid that discussion. There are structural challenges that municipalities experience, but a majority of municipalities are competent in providing the service. Of course, more could be done to improve the sustainability of the provision of the service, and that we acknowledge and accept. So this conversation certainly is not linked to the competency of municipalities, as was said, because that is not the reason why the definition has been introduced. We are quite curious to try and understand what is behind the introduction of the definition. The only thing we can do is make our own assumptions, and that assumption is a growing interest to want to take over the responsibilities of local government, in particular from the other spheres of government. And that is our biggest concern. Today we're talking electricity. Last week we were talking about water. So the conversation is an ongoing conversation. And we believe what the focus should be is, if there is an acknowledgement of weaknesses in the system, then national and provincial government must exercise their constitutional responsibility in providing and directing support to municipalities. And that should be the conversation, not taking over the execution of the responsibility.
Lance, you're very good at this, but you're not going to get away with it, because structural weaknesses is no small matter. So we're going to have to explore what are these structural weaknesses, because, as you put it, today we're talking electricity. Yes, there is actually an ongoing conversation about water, and that's why national government ministers often warn municipalities that if you don't sort this out, we're actually going to take over. So why not just allow national government to take over because of these incompetencies?
Well, as a starting point, we must all have respect for the law, and the Constitution is the highest law of the country, and it defines how things must happen. Until we go and we amend the Constitution, and in so doing, it would also provide alternatives. Until we have had that discussion, I don't think we're at that point yet. We need to respect what the Constitution provides for. There are obligations, as I've said earlier, placed on those that would have to support municipalities. And we think that more should be done to support municipalities in executing this and other functions, because there is no guarantee that in taking over the function, it would be delivered better, or there would be improvements in the delivery of the service itself. That has not been proven, so there are no guarantees. So we may be worse off than better off, instead of respecting the law, respecting the Constitution, and ensuring that we provide the support to municipalities to essentially service our communities, because that should be at the core of our conversation. How best do we serve the needs of communities? And assisting municipalities to do so is at the forefront of driving the principles of cooperative governance in the Constitution.
Okay, so if supporting municipalities would amount to helping train the staff because there are obvious incompetencies, is that what you mean when you say perhaps the focus should be on supporting municipalities? How should these municipalities be supported?
Well, there are various weaknesses that have been identified. Firstly, perhaps if I could touch on that, is infrastructure weaknesses. So there a lot of the infrastructure has been neglected in some parts of our municipalities. And the first thing is to look at sustained maintenance of the infrastructure to be able to deliver the function. Secondly, you've mentioned it, there are certainly opportunities to want to improve the capacity of the technical component, being staff members themselves within the system. So ongoing training is also something that could be explored. Thirdly, we must also address the inability of municipalities to collect 100% of what is owed to them, because that inability, the inability of households, business, and government as well, and that debt currently sits at around 310 billion rands. The inability of municipalities to collect the 310 billion impacts on the execution and sustainability of the function itself. So we must also address the weaknesses in what is owed to municipalities for delivering this and other services. So there are a range of things that could be introduced as interventions as part of supporting municipalities to execute and sustain the delivery of the functions. So it is not as simple as saying, no, it is just one single weakness. There are a range of weaknesses that have been identified. There are appropriate response mechanisms, and we should be looking together as the three spheres of government, all and sundry, to try and respond appropriately to those weaknesses that have been identified.
All right. Lance Joel, let's leave the conversation there. He is the CEO of the South African Local Government